So I just got back from seeing Fantasy Island, and sorry, I was stroking out there for a second. Fantasy Island is directed by the people that did Truth or Dare, and I have not seen that movie because I heard it gives you testicle cancer. In this movie, a group of people with about as much character depth as a box of sock puppets arrive on a mysterious island where they are granted a fantasy by Michael Pena in the worst performance ever, but only one fantasy per customer, and they must be finished to its natural completion. Obviously, from my sarcastic demeanor, you can tell I was somewhat underwhelmed by this movie. This is usually the part where I tell you what I like about the movie. Unfortunately, unlike with my other reviews, I watched several reviews on this one before seeing it myself. The movie kind of snuck past me over the weekend as there was no Thursday night showing, so I had almost tossed it up as a lost opportunity. However, members of my Facebook group, who I'm very active with and who I'm holding in very high regard, recommended that I review this. See, I actually listen to my customers, so I must humbly oblige. Reviews on Blumhouse's Fantasy Island have been, for the most part, negative. I'm not one to do spoilers, so that unfortunately leaves me with very little to talk about. So that being said, if there was anything at all that I liked, it was the fact that I unintentionally laughed at how unbelievably bad the script of this movie actually is. See, nowadays, movies are over-reliant on brand recognition, which is why we have so many remakes and reboots. This very much feels like Blumhouse somehow got the rights to Fantasy Island and assembled a writer's room full of young, inexperienced people, fresh out of college or maybe even high school. I wouldn't be surprised if many of the crew involved were looking to write this film off as a tax-free vacation because very little effort, if any, is involved here. First of all, it treats the entire audience like they're a bunch of lobotomy patients. The dialogue immediately falls flat on its face right from the opening credits. It is a virtual smorgasbord of pop culture references and buzzwords like, "Wow, racist much?" Like, "OMG." One person makes a reference to Tupac at least 3 times in a span of about 30 seconds because it thinks the audience is too fucking dumb to know what a hologram is. Bitch, are you for real? I wanted to stab myself in the balls with a rusty olive fork. Fuck off, movie. This is where I decided to get up and take a piss. These characters are blatantly vapid stereotypes, which could have actually worked in this situation had it been helmed by anyone with talent or even a hint of self-respect. The dialogue is so bogged down with heavy exposition that you get no time to learn anything interesting about them other than must-tell story, which also fails because clearly there's not much story to tell. Let's take this opportunity to explain why character development is important in a movie. In order to have a horror or a thriller, if you plan to put your main protagonist in peril, you have to give your audience something to care about so that when something happens to them, you are filled with ominous dread. Let's take, for example, The Breakfast Club. A group of kids from completely different social classes are placed in a situation. In this case, these kids are trapped in detention like Fantasy Island. Like Fantasy Island, all these kids are stereotypes. However, as boredom from detention sets in, kids slowly begin to learn about each other, and that even though they come from different social classes, they all have the ability to love, hurt, and to share. Those common character traits combine to form an unlikely but believable friendship by the end of the film. In Fantasy Island, everyone is a selfish shithead for different reasons because the writing is too fucking lazy to give you anything to make you care about any of them. Even a somewhat recent movie like The Conjuring managed to get that part right. The old trope of why would anyone go into a big old creepy house? This is solved by literally one line of dialogue explaining why this guy was flat broke, got a great deal on a big house, and took it out of desperation. Blumhouse's Fantasy Island would rather cut that kind of shit out so you can give more pop culture references and sight gags. Let's talk about the marketing of this movie. It is advertised as a horror movie, right down to its clever poster of an island shaped like a skull. That's one thing I can actually praise it. Has a cool poster. This is not a horror movie, period. It's a thriller, a PG-13 thriller. About halfway through the second act, the movie decides to once again force a goddamn twist. Plot twist! We got a plot twist here! See, nobody cares. Only this twist is not beyond stupid, but it breaks the movie completely, even tripping over its own rules several times. It feels like it was cobbled together with reshoots. Also, about the last 15 minutes of this movie is horror trope city. Some scenes lifted right out of Brendan Fraser's The Mummy. You know, where someone's there 1 minute and then gone. Oh, look, there he is again. The longer this movie plays out, the more embarrassing it gets for everyone involved. It feels like you're in the middle of a knockoff version of R.L. Steen's Goosebumps, but if it was written by sea cucumbers. Also, remember the magic black goo that I told you about from Black Christmas? Spoilers! That shit is back again. They bring in the black goo as a deus ex machina in order to have scary moments in the film, even though the scenes do nothing to really service the plot. Is Blumhouse building a cinematic universe around black goo, the way Marvel built its cinematic universe around the Infinity Stones?
Black gold, Texas tea.
You do believe me, don't you, Dad?
Plot twists and double crosses and then more double crosses and then a few cheap scares. Not jump scares, which is actually another compliment I can pay this movie. This movie either forgot to add or gave up on those. Shocking. I wanted everyone dead by the end of the film. There is not one single performance in this film that stands out. All these actors are as low energy as possible. Don't even get me started on these two chuckle fucks. Portia Doubleday is fantastic in the show Mr. Robot. She has the ability to seem innocent and lovable 1 minute and then be aggressively foreboding the next minute on Mr. Robot. In this movie, she exists mostly as a plot MacGuffin. What a waste. And then even Michael Pena's as Mr. Rourke felt way off as a casting choice. When he said, "Welcome to Fantasy Island," I awkwardly laughed.
Good evening. I'm Mr. Rourke. Let me officially welcome you to Fantasy Island.
Guests, I am Mr. Rourke, your host. Welcome to Fantasy Island.
I don't know if that was intended to be funny, but it made me chuckle. It felt like an SNL skit. He's no Ricardo Montalban.
From hell's heart, I stab at thee.
Best Star Trek villain ever. Fight me. You know what my fantasy is? You come up with a great premise. Maybe you even set up the twist early. Then you build your world, and then you set the rules for this world. Then you build out your characters and give them some kind of character development. And then you imagine how these characters would interact in service to the story you want to tell. Then you don't shove this into a 40-year-old IP that nobody cares about. People are so beyond bored with remakes. Nobody, and I mean literally nobody, was sitting around saying, "Man, I totally wish they would remake Fantasy Island." I believe I'm speaking for the majority of movie-going audiences everywhere when I say all we want is a good story. Period. Nobody has any nostalgia for Fantasy Island. Stop with the damn remakes, please. While I applaud Blumhouse for at least being bold enough to be willing to turn this property into something different, ultimately they failed at every level of execution. In fact, I'm pretty sure they chose to set this entire concept on Fantasy Island just to milk a couple more pop culture jokes out of it. Except, based on what you think this audience is for, nobody's going to remember Fantasy Island. It almost feels as if this was originally conceived by one person to be a season of a rebooted TV show, but then canceled, and then reworked to be a lame January horror movie. Remember Fantasy Island? Look, boss, they're playing the plane. Wasn't that weird? Take my money? How do I score this one? My brand is built on movies that are unintentionally funny. This movie is smug in that it really thinks its story is smart and clever. When I showed up to a movie called Blumhouse's Fantasy Island, I wasn't expecting deep psychological Lovecraftian horror directed by Alfred Hitchcock, but this one feels like watching somebody on a talent show that can't sing. You're not comfortable, you're kind of embarrassed, you almost feel sorry for them, but you can't stop watching. I couldn't stop laughing, especially that third act. I was scared of being thrown out of the theater. I would, however, consider doing this as a watch party just to break down every movie sin this one makes in real time. It's a terrible movie, and I'm kind of glad it exists because it's fun talking about it. So I'm giving this one a 2 out of 5 cheese curds. Government cheese. Only because it has the same amount of awe and wonder that you can find from slowing down to watch a car burning on the side of the road. Can't look away, doesn't mean you should pay for it either. One more thing, Blumhouse. Stop saying, "From the producers of Get Out and Halloween." You know, M. Night Shyamalan directed The Sixth Sense, but then he also gave us The Village, The Lady in the Water, and The Happening.
We're packing hot dogs for the road. You know, hot dogs get a bad rap. They got a cool shape, they got protein. You like hot dogs, right?
You can make great movies on a low budget, but you need talent. Get Out was good because you had a good director. Halloween was popular because horror movie fans love Halloween and they love Michael Myers. The goodwill of the general public is wearing out soon. Please hire some better writers and find some directors that have some sense of dignity.
Stop it. Get some help.
Remember Halloween? Remember Tupac?
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?